Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Everything Co-op. We like to talk about co-ops and how they can benefit our community. And today we have Mr. Amaha Sellassie. Good morning, Amaha.
Morning.
Yes.
Much love.
Much love back to you, bro. Where are you this morning? What part of the world?
I'm in Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton?
In the cold Dayton, Ohio. I actually got a little bit warmer today, but yeah, it's still cold.
Well, I am in Tucson, Arizona. Daytimes are nice and warm, but nights can get real cold. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, Amaha, tell me a little bit about you. Tell the audience a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? I know you've been on the show before and you've told people, but I like whoever's listening now to get a sense of who you are.
Yeah, sure. Grew up in Dayton, Ohio. Went to school here. I actually started in college. I was doing supply chain management at first, and then I started studying King more and more. And from that, he had this phrase, agape love is community. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? Agape love is community. 'Cause I'd already been to community talking about love and forgiveness and bringing people together. And then, I realized that, from a Christian perspective, Christ is many members in one body. So that agape love is that many members in one body. So I was like, oh, so you mean this whole time I've been, out here talking about community and didn't even know it, So then I switched my major to sociology and, any kind of, workshop, book, anything I could find on community. I was just hungry to learn, And that led me towards, getting my master's in public sociology, and then working on my PhD right now in action research and public sociology.
So, are you at your dissertation yet?
Right before it, I had to finish my second part of the prelim, and then have to do start my dissertation, which is going to be on the market.
On what market?
Gem City Market.
Okay. So tell people what Gem City Market is.
Sure. Yeah. So Gem City Market is a community-owned and worker-owned co-op grocery store in Dayton, Ohio. We opened up, I want to say this is our third year. 20 or 21. We opened up, and we opened up in an area that was food apartheid, meaning that 80% of the west side of Dayton, which was hyper-segregated, was African American, and we had 40,000 residents and no full-service grocery store. And so, we opened up on how to increase access to fresh fruits and vegetables in an area that, probably some will define as food desert, but we like Karen Washington's definition of food apartheid better because we want to acknowledge the structural mechanisms that are in place that keep Black and brown communities out of access to fresh fruits and vegetables at an affordable price.
What do you mean by structural mechanisms that keep us from getting it?
Sure. So redlining divided up urban areas into areas to put resources in and not put resources in. You know what I mean? Yeah, green, good for investments, blue and yellow, which was somewhat suspect for investment. And then you had red, which was Black and brown, and that was not no, but hell no when it comes to putting it in.
Well, wait a minute, not no, but hell no in terms of putting investment,
yeah.
Putting resources in that community is hell no.
Yes. Because it was based off of the idea that black, brown, and white could not live together. And so they had to be segregated out, right? So we're looking at the construction of race, And so we ended up with areas that had concentrated advantage and concentrated disadvantage based upon race, and like literally different ecosystems inside of it, like meaning like how resources flowed, the structural makeup of the communities, when it comes to transportation, housing, access to food, all these things, right? And so in Dayton, what we found is that like Dayton was hyper segregated by the river, where 98% of the black community lives on the west side, 94% of the white community lives on the east side of the river, along with the Turkish, Latino, and African refugees. But we found in like 2015, this study was done by Montgomery County Public Health in conjunction with the Kirwan Institute at Ohio State. And it showed that opportunity, meaning conditions favorable for the attainment of a goal, was also followed the path of redlining, meaning that areas that were redlined, for 30 years, now were low and very low in access to opportunity. And areas that were green are now high and very high in access to opportunity. So like, W.E. Du Bois, he said that the problem of the 21st century is going to be the problem of the color line. And now we saw that the color line translated into access to opportunity, and so in multiple areas, right? And so, like, that's the structural mechanism. I would call it structural violence, actually.
Because structural violence? Violence?
Yeah, violence. Yeah. Like, how does the arrangement of resources and the patterns and structure in the community impede life? So you have excessive death. You know what I mean? Meaning that, like, infant mortality is dramatically increased, right? There's a whole bunch of studies that talk about the weathering effect. How, like, a 40-year-old woman has the body of a 50-year-old because of the excessive stress and the weathering down that comes because of the lived environment, right? Because, like, when you look at health, 80-some% of health is not about, like, going to the doctor and even what you eat, A lot of it is about your zip code, Because zip codes determine life expectancy, And so it's how, like, the arrangement of resources is concentrated inside of a zip code has like a huge impact on our overall health quality.
Well, I know I had some folks on from Cleveland, and they were saying black folks inside Cleveland, inside the neighborhood, inside of the food deserts, inside of redlining, had a life expectancy, let's say black men had a life expectancy of 65. I think it was 55, but let's say 65. Okay. When you go to the suburbs, you had white men that had a 10-year life expectancy more than black men inside the neighborhood. So yes. If black men had a 65-year life expectancy, white men had a 75-year life expectancy on the outskirts.
Yes. And that is universal. That every red line community will have numbers like that, right? And even Anchorage, Alaska, I found out a couple years ago, had redlining. You know what I mean? So like redlining is a huge piece of like the structural mechanism, that was enacted, by banks in participation with the federal government, right? That enabled these conditions to exist. And the interesting thing about Dayton, right? So we talked about East and West Dayton. So within East and West Dayton, there was like a 6 or 7 year life expectancy gap just by what side of the river you lived on, right? Which is astronomical, And like prevalence of cancer and all these different health outcomes that were distinct just by what part of the city you lived in. But now when we add the suburbs, Like, it went up to like 12 or 13 years difference life expectancy. And what was interesting is that like when you look at it on stop me if I'm getting too like nerdy, but like
wait. I'm enjoying this. I'm learning. Keep going, bro. Okay. Keep going.
Okay. So if we're looking inside the city, we see low and we see low and very low and high and very high opportunities. Like we see like this gap inside the city. But when we pull it out and look at it from a county level, all of Dayton is seen as very low compared to the rest of the county. So that lets us know that like that low and very low, and when you look at it on a the micro level, is astronomically low, because it's like when you pull it out, even what was considered high is considered low compared to the rest of the county. You know what I mean? So like it's a huge thing, right? Because like even when we look at Montgomery County, I don't know the exact numbers, but I want to say at least 80% of all African Americans are still concentrated on the west side of Dayton. You know what I mean? And so like it's like, and that was by design. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting. Redlining started in this area. You know what I mean? Like Springfield, which is like a suburb of Dayton, is like kind of the origins of this whole notion of redlining. You know what I mean? And so yeah, there's deep history involved, right? And so it's like, on some level, I think like, how do we challenge these structural mechanisms that are decreasing life expectancy, decreasing access to quality education, all of these things, just by, where you live, you know what I mean? And so, and that's not just a Dayton issue. Like that is national. Every city, like even grocery stores, right? Any red line community, you're 3 times more likely to live in a quote unquote food desert. And you're also 3 times more likely to live in what they call food swamps, meaning that there's an overabundance of things that are not healthy. You know what I mean? If it's malt liquor, high fructose corn syrup, and all these things. And so fast food, you know what I mean? So we get both simultaneously. We have an extreme lack of access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and a hyper accessibility to the things that are, I want to say, deleterious, like that are harmful for our health. You know what I mean? Both happening simultaneously. You know what I mean? And so it's a deep thing.
So it's deep, and the question is, how do we get out of it? But before we go there, there's a gentleman by the name of Ed Whitfield, which I had on the show. Okay, and he was talking about the Renaissance food co-op in Greensboro, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Similar to you, it took them 8 years to get started.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you guys to get started?
About 5. Maybe 5.5.
Okay.
Like yeah.
And they closed their doors in 3 years. So you've been open longer if you got started 2021 than they did. They closed. And he was saying getting people to change behavior from going to the dollar store and buying that sugar product,
right,
that high fructose sugar stuff, to coming into a store where you can get fresh fruits and vegetables. But let's say for a meal you're paying $1 for the fructose stuff, and for a meal in organic and fresh foods you may be paying $4 or $5. Getting people to change, one, the headset, but secondly is, do they have the dollars to make that change, or will they stick in there? Some can't make that change. So you all have been open now since when? When did you, Gem City?
I want to say May of 2020. It seems right.
Right during COVID, boy.
Yeah. We opened up during COVID. Yeah, through the heart of it. Yeah.
May of 2020. May of 2025, 5 years, almost 5 years. So
no, we're 3. We're going on. Well, maybe it was 21 then, because like in this coming May will be 4 years.
Okay, so it'll be 21 then.
Okay.
So you still outlived Renaissance. They were only 3 years, so you were past that 3-year period.
Yeah. Through when we talk about co-ops, the P6 principle is so important, right? Cooperation amongst cooperatives. And without Bob the Ed and like the lessons of Renaissance, and like we would not have outlived Renaissance. You know what I mean? Like hands down, Bob the Ed is the OG that like has like helped guide and given us a roadmap, I would say, on like how to be successful.
Oh, I didn't know he was working with you all. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just from the article and just, being, he's accessible to pick his brain, you know what I mean? So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I like what you're talking about in your, I assume from your sociology studies. I thought redlining was simple. They did not loan blacks money to buy a house. Okay. But you've just broadened my understanding with redlining and all that it meant. Now I know I studied Tulsa, and what made Tulsa and Black Wall Street so successful was it was a closed community of black people that traded within that black community.
Yeah.
And whites could not understand, and they were jealous of how wealthy the blacks got in a racist society. But they were working together, and they said, in most black communities, a dollar will turn one or two times. Like in economics, they call it the multiplier effect, which I did not understand when I was taking economics. But after studying what happens in a co-op, it became clear to me if you go and make money and you come back to our community and you spend it, whether you get your hair done, no, you don't get your hair done. Okay. or, buying shoes in the community or going to the cobbler, whatever you do in that community, that means that person that has that money, so it's already turned one time. And then if that person then takes that dollar and buys something else in the community, that dollar is turning, and there's more and more people having a chance of being profitable. They said in Tulsa, a dollar turned in Wall Street 32 times.
Yeah.
Where in the black community in the U.S. now is normally one or two times, in the white community it's 5 or 6 times. Yeah.
Like I think the black dollar stays in the black community, like you can count it in seconds. You know what I mean? It's like 4 seconds or like 10. You know what I mean? Like the amount of time that the black dollar stays in the black community is astronomically small, right? And so I think you're getting at like an innovation that like if it from Dr. Jessica Nimhart and Collective Courage, you know what I mean, to Jamila Medley, you know what I mean, like this notion of like solidarity economy, you know what I mean, and like how we flip the dollar more within black and brown communities. And I think the key thing that Dr. Jessica talks about is this notion of combining community transformation with economic development, right? That like she highlights how the freedom movement at one point had those two pieces co-creating each other, but that over time they got separated, where like community transformation, collective hope was seen as one thing, and economic development was seen as a different thing, and it's like the two working together is what moves the community forward, because we got to say like this is the direction that we're trying to go, this is our aspiration, and then how do we develop our economic engine and our institutions to propel us and like lead us in that direction, you know what I mean? And so yeah, I think you're spot on as far as like the things that we need to examine, you know what I mean, as we're moving forward, and how we're learning from all the trailblazers that came before us, you know what I mean, that helped pave the way. And now it's like, there's different nuggets of pieces of like insights that have happened. And like now I feel like this time, okay, how do we converge these together? Like what is the totality of the analysis, you know what I mean, as we're like paving our way forward, you know what I mean, and acknowledging our shared future, you know what I mean, because I think part of the misnomer is that we're independent, you know what I mean, and rugged individualism, you know what I mean, instead of like, no, like we actually are interdependent by nature, you know what I mean, and it's like that implies we have a shared future, or like King would say, a single garment of destiny, and so like if we have a shared future, then we have the power to choose to consciously build our shared future together. You know what I mean? Yeah, what are these collective outcomes that we want to see? You know what I mean? What is our aspiration and our collective hope? You know what I mean? That's so compelling inside that we're willing to like put our time, talents, and resources towards pursuing. You know what I mean? Like I like to call it like, how do we get our gifts into the center of the circle? You know what I mean? Like what is this thing that like, boy, man, for this, oh, I'm all in. You know what I mean? Like in stepping in that circle, you know what I mean? That we can truly move forward and connect by our gifts, you know what I mean? And the abundance of talent that we have in our community, you know what I mean? To like activate community power. Because community power is based upon bringing our gifts together. You know what I mean? We create our own opportunity even. So going back to the structural conversation, I used to think that like opportunity was based upon the external structure solely. You know what I mean? And there is part of it because there's the conditions of the environment, right? But real opportunity is how we bring our gifts together. As we bring our gifts together in cooperation, we co-create our own opportunity, right? And that's community power. That's self-determination. You know what I mean? And so it's like, and that's a choice. We can choose the level of our cooperation. You know what I mean? Some people call it collective impact. You know what I mean? Like how we're like working together from multiple systems and multiple positions towards a shared goal or a shared objective or like a North Star. You know what I mean? Where we don't gotta like fully have everything lined out. But like, you know, I would say right now, we're seeing the fruit of late stage capitalism. You know what I mean? And so like when do we see that like, you know, this is not it? You know what I mean? That like if we stay on this boat, however far we go, you know what I mean? Like I don't see this like lining up with my aspirations individually and our collective aspirations of like acknowledging human dignity, human worth, you know what I mean? And so if that's it, then like when are we gonna pivot? You know what I mean? When are we gonna construct the new? You know what I mean? That lines up with our deep values, you know what I mean? Instead of like trying to operate outside of our deep aspirations. You know what I mean? 'Cause I just believe that, you know, there's more people that believe that love is supreme and wants to live in a world that acknowledges human dignity and worth than does not. You know what I mean? But if we don't live into it, then we're not creating the contradiction for people to know that like, oh yeah, beloved community is possible. You know what I mean? That like another world truly is possible by how we choose to see ourselves and see each other and the interactions that we have, you know what I mean? To change the patterns in our community, you know what I mean? To change I like to call it the social wind, you know what I mean? Like, oh, that's all in our power. We don't gotta go downtown and beg and plead for it, you know what I mean? It's all about how we choose to be amongst each other. I'm sorry, I get going.
Okay. No, do not apologize. It is this social wind that a whole bunch that you said caught my attention. And I also like not having to go downtown. My father, a big man, he was in World War II, my grandfather in World War I, and very proud man, worked on the railroad, blue collar. My grandfather worked in the mines in West Virginia.
Wow.
And I remember going, I don't know how I got out of 7 children, how I got to go with my parents when they went to borrow some money. They went downtown. And I was embarrassed for my father because I had never seen him so small, begging to borrow some money at high interest rates. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it at all. I was just sitting there watching the interaction between the white man sitting behind the desk and my parents wanting to borrow some money. So yeah, that when you hit that going downtown and begging, I witnessed that at 8 years old or something. I don't know how old I was.
Right.
And had lots and lots of respect for my dad, and just huge, strong man in our neighborhood. But when he went downtown to borrow money, and what's always so interesting to me, when you go to borrow money, you're paying often a lot of money back to the person you're borrowing money from. It's not like they're giving you anything.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's real. And you know, I think that's a great example of like, well, a couple things come to my mind. First of all, you know, is being a thermostat and not a thermometer. You know, like
you gotta explain that one to me.
Okay, so like, you know, what does a thermometer do in a room? Right?
It measures the temperature.
It measures the temperature, right? But a thermostat controls the temperature. You know what I mean? So like, say like I'm in my room or in my house, and it's like, you know, it's freezing cold right now, and I'm like, boy, you know what? I want to put this thing at 70. You know what I mean? if I go to the thermometer's like, man, you know what? Yeah, it's 60 in here right now. And I'm like, let's make it 70. Like, man, yep, it's 60 right now. You know what I mean? It's like, it has no ability to change the temperature. You know what I mean? Like, all it does is reflect what already is. You know what I mean? But the thermostat, you know what I mean, shapes, controls, you know what I mean? I can put it at 70, I can put it at 80, I can put it at 65, you know what I mean? And so, like, how are we the thermostats in our community? You know what I mean? Because power is the ability to change the environment around us. Like, does the environment conform and shape to our aspiration? You know what I mean?
Power is the ability to change the environment that we're in.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I really want to talk about being a thermostat and having the power, how co-ops can help one be the thermostat and have the power to change our community.
Come on, Baba, see?
Okay, well, I'm learning from you, bro.
I'm learning from you. What?
Okay. Particularly when you begin to talk about human dignity, a white lady, a British lady, was on the air 7-8 years ago now, and she said co-ops help people to come out of poverty with dignity.
Yes.
Okay, and that was so much insightful, more powerful than talking about economic growth. I mean, it helps to get economics and have cash and wealth. That's all cool. But to change the inside of a person to where they have dignity, self-worth, where when you go downtown to borrow money or to get whatever you want from the powers that be, then you can have the dignity to stand tall.
Right.
You can even if you're asking for help and support, where you're going to pay a lot for it, but power, having that power. Okay, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. We're going to talk also to Amaha about the future. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Program is Everything Co-op. We have Mr. Amaha Sellassie from Dayton, Ohio, in the Gem City Market with us today.
What up?
He's a sociologist. He's got his master's, working on his PhD in that field. He's almost all but dissertation. He's almost ready to do that dissertation. And he's going to talk about his dissertation, the Gem City Market, which is a co-op, a food co-op. But it was interesting when he talked about Gem City Market, he said it was a consumer co-op and a worker-owned co-op, which means that the consumers, the people that shop there, own it, the business, and the people that work there own the business.
Right.
So that's a very interesting model. I only heard a few food co-ops. The first one I heard was up in Seattle. But when we took the break, you were giving us the example, the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer. And a thermostat has the ability to change the temperature. Thermometer only has the ability to measure. It can't do anything else. And you told us what power is. To change.
Yeah, the ability to change or transform, shape the environment around us.
Yeah. And just another real quick story. When I was 13-ish, a group of us was walking over to, in what Bluefield, the north side. We lived on the south side. Most blacks lived on the north side. We lived on a mountain on the south side that was pro-black and white, working class community. But we had to walk to the north side to go to the recreation to play basketball. About a mile and a half walk, maybe 2. And I remember saying, why don't they build us a playground on our mountain? And I wondered the question of who is they.
Right.
So I pondered that question, and I came up with they is us. We.
Right.
And we ended up with the older guys, the guys that were in high school at the time, we basically dug out a mountain and put up one goal, and we could play 3-on-3 basketball. We didn't have the long, but we then changed our environment, and that was an early on example. And I didn't understand it, but I do know asking the question, and I pondered that question: why don't they build us a basketball court on this side of the town, and they are us? We are they. Right. Okay. With this power, we have the ability. We can be thermostat and change, and we did. It's interesting to dig out a mountain so that take the dirt from the top and put it toward the bottom, and then you end up with a flat thing and have one goal.
That's powerful. Because to me, that's an example of cooperation too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like you came together and like you cooperatively met a need in your community that you could not do by yourself. Y'all did it together, and now you didn't have to walk 2 miles to go play basketball. You know what I mean? You could play 3-on-3. You know whatever. You know what I mean? At what you created. We played. You know what I mean?
1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and that thing of going around the circles and popping them. But it was working together. Yeah. It was pick and shovel working together to carve out that mountain to get something flat, or almost. Okay. As flat as we could get it. And it was, as a matter of fact, at last year's Black Co-op Agenda, I was in a conference in a room, and somebody from the back of the room, a brother from the back of the room, said, "I've been operating like this for 40 years. I just didn't have the terminology."
That part.
Yeah.
That part. Yeah.
We've been.
It's intuitive, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly for survival.
And you know, right. You know, and I would say that like I think a byproduct of redlining, or just like the notion that like black is inhuman, you know, is that like it forced us to work together. You know what I mean? Like we had to build our own things, and we had to do our own things because that was the only option. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I think intuitively we have more cooperative practices than we acknowledge. You know what I mean? Like we don't have the language for it. You know what I mean? But when you look at the actions and the outcomes, you know what I mean? Yeah, we're cooperative. You know what I mean? And in the African philosophy, they'll say Ubuntu, I am because you are. You know what I mean? And that like my humanity is tied to your humanity, you know, and vice versa, you know? And so it's like, yeah, that was community power. Y'all build a basketball rim, you know what I mean? The thing, you know what I mean? Like that is so inspiring. You know what I mean?
And we were young kids, and the gentleman in the back of the room said, "I've been living like this for 40 years. I didn't know. I don't know how old he was. He could have been 40, okay, 45ish, 50. I don't know how old he was. But I had, and people can go on everything.coop, the webpage, and listen to a gentleman by the name of Jim Joseph. He's since passed, but he was the U.S. ambassador to South Africa when Mandela was the president of South Africa, and he explained Ubuntu on air to me because I had not heard of that. Okay. Yeah. And it's a way of life. It's a way of being. In Africa, I am because you are, and you are because I am. So, and he said that's why Mandela could not do harm to the jailers and the people that put him in jail, because he would end up being hurt himself. Yeah. Okay, I am because you are. You are because I am. Right. It was too bad those Europeans in South Africa didn't live that way. Okay. Yeah.
To me, like that's the underlying assumptions. You know what I mean? Like are we going to be rooted in love, which is Ubuntu, you know, our interdependence, our interconnectedness, or are we going to ground ourselves in fear? You know what I mean? Which is isolation, independence, competition, you know, survival of the fittest. You know what I mean? And so, like, I think in this hour, you know, like King said, you know, I think it's auspicious that the inauguration happened on King's celebration of King's birthday, you know? Because, like, King's last book was, where do we go from here? Chaos or community, right? And the last chapter of the book was the World House vision, that we can no longer live apart. So we talk about like we inherited this great house, you know what I mean? That we can no longer as human beings live apart. So our challenge is, how do we live together, you know? And so like that is a vision of a future. And then there's other visions of future, you know? And like, so at this valley of decision, which way are we going to go, you know? And like, we can't just say we choose, a lot of us say we choose community and we'll even like, you know, give each other high fives. And then we go back into living in a world that is not pressing towards community, you know? And so like every year we hold hands and we sing, "We Shall Overcome." And then we do nothing else until next year and we hold hands and say, "We shall overcome." So like, when are we going to actually have "We shall overcome" being a guiding principle that shapes how we interact, shapes our policy and structure, you know what I mean? That we actually live deeper into community to know that community actually is a thing, you know? And that's where I think co-ops come in, right? It's like how do we work collectively towards meeting our needs and building in our communities things that are more conducive for human development, right? Because, you know, cooperation is a moral force for human development, right? And so it's like, how do we cooperate more? How do we acknowledge not only the dignity in each other, but acknowledge the gifts? Because I think our communities are where they are because we have all these gifts that are kind of latent in the community because we're trying to compete and outshine instead of figuring out like how we bring our gifts together. Because our gifts are not our own, but for each other. You know what I mean? And so it's like, how do we bring our gifts together to co-create opportunity, to propel us forward towards the future that we want to create? You know? And that's why I say it comes down to choice. You know, we can choose the level that we want to cooperate.
I have a new quote: "Cooperation is a moral force." Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
And there's a lot of power in that. And I also had, and we sang and we put our little fingers together and crossed our arms. "We shall overcome."
Yeah.
And singing at 18 and 19, "We shall overcome," maybe 16 and 17. I would change it to "We have overcome," as I'm singing it.
Okay.
So it's like, we shall overcome, we will overcome, we have overcome. Where do we get to the point where we stop singing "we shall" and we are in action, taking the power with our gifts, working together?
Yeah.
There are 7 principles of cooperation. You mentioned principle 6.
Right.
Cooperatives, cooperating. So you get a bigger force to overcome. Yeah, I got it, bro.
Yeah. So I think you're questioning, like my interpretation of it, you know, which could be wrong, but like, what is the praxis? You know, like now's about embodiment. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we can say marvelous things, including myself. You know what I mean? But like, how much are we actually embodying, including myself? You know what I mean? Because I speak more than I live. You know what I mean? So like, what is my pursuit daily? You know, from when I wake up in the morning until when I go to bed at night, what am I actually pursuing and like pressing into? You know what I mean? And it's like, how do we activate these principles? You know what I mean? And live those principles as like how we make our decisions as we're navigating the day. You know what I mean? Yeah, because, you know, like King wasn't talking about some by and by place, but he was talking about something tangible that we could like actually live into on the earth. You know what I mean? And I think like cooperation is towards that path of peace. You know what I mean? That we study war no more. You know what I mean? Like there's so many things that pivot when we seek to learn how to be friends instead of learning how to compete. You know what I mean? And different things, you know? And so it's like, that's why, like, and I know I'm real heady sometimes, you know what I mean? But like, these underlying assumptions are so important. And I think I need to mention why, because I forget that, you know, that like structure is ideas that we put our resources to, right? So let's talk about redlining. Redlining was the idea that white is superior, white is human, and black is not human, you know? And it's just an idea. You know what I mean? But I make the idea tangible when I put my resources towards the embodiment of that idea. So I say, oh, because of my idea, now I create areas where we concentrate advantage and we concentrate disadvantage. You know what I mean? And so it's like, that's that paradox, you know what I mean? That they made something tangible out of something that actually is not even true, and it's just an idea, you know? And so, like, what are the ideas that we're building structure on? You know what I mean? That we're structuralizing, as like John Powell would say, you know? Like, how are we, are we rooting ourselves in love? And then how does love shape and inform the structures of how we interact with each other? You know, how banks work, you know what I mean? Like all these things, you know what I mean? Like the underlying assumption is not our aspiration. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge is that, like, we say we want something, but we're not, like, derooting, you know what I mean, the underlying assumptions. And so we're still building durable structures. I'll give you a perfect example. Michelle Alexander in The New Jim Crow, she talks about the durability of structure. So we had the time of enslavement, right? And then, that system went down, but the underlying assumption stayed the same. So then it came up as Reconstruction. It came up as Jim Crow segregation, because the underlying assumption stayed the same. They just changed the way that it looked, you know what I mean? Like the way that it looks on the surface, but the underlying idea is the same, right? And so right now, like, we're witnessing a destructuring again, you know what I mean? Like we're getting rid of a lot of the structure of now, but the assumption is we're going to build it again off of this notion of hierarchy amongst human beings. You know what I mean? And so, like, now it's like, oh, let's challenge these underlying assumptions. Let's go a little bit deeper, and, like, what are the ideas that we're building our structures off of? And do we have the courage to build our structures off of our collective aspiration? You know? And I think that's our challenge right now. You know what I mean? Like, how do we see difference as not hierarchical? You know, all of these things, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's an interesting time, you know what I mean? Because we're at the beginning of something new, you know what I mean? And so, whose imagination are we going to follow? You know what I mean? Because, like, you know, I think, especially for Black and brown communities, we've been operating off of an imagination that was not built by us. You know what I mean? So how do we imagine for ourselves what this is? You know what I mean? And we don't, you know, like, the notion of race is not our imagination. You know what I mean? Like we understand fundamental human dignity, you know?
So I'm trying to break down, because you can't get heavy.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. You can get heavy. So a guy that, my world on education was math and chemistry. So you're talking words and philosophies and stuff, sociology. So let me understand what I think I hear you saying. Donald Trump, as president, is going to change some of those underlying ideas, or he is going to he's going to reinforce those old ideas.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like the assumptions that, like, built, you know, Jim Crow is, like, the same assumption they're trying to build off of again.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And it's like that's why, like, if we don't go deep, we'll just keep building. Like King would say, love is durable power. You know what I mean? And so, like, are we building a world based upon fear or based upon love? And I don't even know fully what that means. You know what I mean? But like to me, like, those are a dialogue, right? Because, like, Dr. Jessica, she says we gotta move from aspiration to acceptance, you know, or from believing to knowing. So what do we know enough that it shapes and informs our actions? And we'll know that we actually know it by the way we act. You know what I mean? Like we can't act the same and say we know something different. You know what I mean?
Okay, so getting into co-ops, forming a Gem City market, no matter where you are in the world, is a way of changing that structure.
Yeah.
And having power.
It's like, yes. You know, like, you know, I appreciate Jamila so much, because she always talked about that association of people. You know what I mean? That, like, people come together to meet needs in their community. You know, we leverage our gifts and talents, you know what I mean? And it's like, you know, my vision for the Gem City market is that, like, how is the Gem City market a hub of a more beloved community? How is it a hub for those that believe another world is possible? You know what I mean? And through shopping there, we're helping to build the economy, you know what I mean, and build the institutions, right? And a gathering place of those that believe another world is possible. Because on some levels, you got to build like how do you identify what are the orgs, the nonprofits, the people that are that believe another world is possible, and how we increase our dialogue together. You know what I mean? Because the dialogue is so important. Like aspiration dialogues talk about something in the future. Oh, one day, da 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 da. But a acceptance dialogue, or a dialogue based upon knowing, okay, what are we doing now? You know what I mean? Like, how are we leveraging, you know what I mean? Oh, you're doing this? Okay. Like, how do we support, and how do we get the information out? You know what I mean? It's it's pursuing something, you know what I mean? And that shift in the dialogue shifts the context and the container, and it allows possibility to emerge. You know what I mean? And so it's that's why I'm so big on the dialogue. I say Paulo Freire, you know what I mean? So it's like how we keep this dialogue,
So dialogue and action.
Yes.
So if somebody wanted to shop at Gem City Market and they live in Washington, D.C. or Arizona or California, how could they do that? How could they go online and buy product?
Yeah, that we do not have yet. You know what I mean? Like online is hard, and it's almost like the Shangri-La, because you need to have so many things on the back end to be able to do online shopping. You need a steady supply chain, so that if you're selling butter, you know what I mean, that you always know you're gonna have that butter there. You know what I mean, that we can put it on the online. It's online is so hard. You know what I mean, and that's our biggest challenge, because right now we don't have the capacity to even do DoorDash, or you know what I mean, like we don't have that capability yet, which is it's a huge gap. You know what I mean, that we're trying to build the capacity to have. You know what I mean?
Okay. So people can drive through Dayton?
Yeah. When you come through Dayton, I think it should be a destination. You know what I mean? When you're coming through the area, come check out the Gem City Market. You know what I mean? We're planting seeds for a new future. You know what I mean? And come support. I guess on some levels, it's if we actually believe in the vision, then we need to support the vision for the vision to be there. I'll give you a perfect example. Like yesterday, someone asked if they could set up some type of booth in the market, to offer some kind of service. And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. But then we talked more, you don't shop there. You've never even been to the market. And so I had to make the connection that is yeah, that's fine. You can do that because we want to be a community hub. But you realize for this to actually exist and stay here, you got to shop there. You know what I mean? It's like you got to put into the thing for the thing to sustain, that we can continue to move and be a hub for community action. You know what I mean? And so it goes back to what Baba Ed said, you know what I mean? And one thing that I ponder, shifting patterns is hard, right? And so it may be important to have a buying club before you open up the grocery store, which takes more capacity and it makes it longer. But you get into the pattern of people buying things together, acquiring their food together, getting that deeper level of shared identity around food before you open the store. Because I think the biggest challenge that we still have not fully figured out, but I think Detroit is the cutting edge, is how do we transfer the association of people into owners as the market opens. You know what I mean? You're co-creating before you have a physical store. So how does that co-creation, that participation process continue and translate into co-owning a physical building with, kale and juice and all of these things that are inside the grocery store? How does that translate? You know what I mean? And I think Detroit's doing an amazing job at that. You know what I mean? And so it's how we translate that point, I think is a critical piece. And that's why Baba Ed talks about the movement has to always be moving. You know what I mean? And we gotta we got a slogan that, we're more than a market, but a movement. You know what I mean? But like we lost part of that focusing in on the association of people. So we're trying to get back to like, yeah, how do we co-own this together? Like, what is the vision that we want to see for our, not only our market, but our community? And how does the market contribute to the broader aspiration of the community? It's a piece in a larger community transformation process.
We are not a market, we are a movement. So Brother Ed said there are three things you need: good management, a movement, and marketing. 3 M's. And he was explaining this on this show when he was talking about why the Renaissance Food Co-op closed in Greensboro, North Carolina. It took them 8 years to open a store, and they were closed in 3. And the movement, he said, is one of the things, getting people to change from going to Dollar General and paying $1 for sugar to coming into a store where they can buy fresh fruits and vegetables, and sort of like for a meal that may cost you $3, $4, $5. And how do you get the people to change that headset? And that's what I'm hearing you talk about. How do you get people to do that in action?
Yeah, 100%. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think participation is part of it, right? Like the more that we participate, the more we have a sense of ownership. Because especially in Black and brown communities, we're used to being recipients. You know what I mean? So that goes back to that social wind, right? That like we receive the wind of other people's imagination, and then we respond and react. You know what I mean? Instead of being like co-creators, you know what I mean, of our future, and like creating our own social wind in our community and determining for ourselves like what is important, you know what I mean, for our families, you know what I mean, to make sure that kids have access to fresh fruits and vegetables when they're going to school, and how that impacts their ability to learn. You know what I mean? All of these things is interconnected. But yeah, the renewing of the mind, I think, is like a critical piece in this work, you know what I mean? And that's why, like, who are the knowledge creators is important, you know what I mean? Like, how do we center the voice of those most impacted in our decision-making process, you know what I mean? So we're not doing for, but we're building power with, you know what I mean? So a lot of it, I think it's an inflection, you know what I mean, of like, the status quo has certain assumptions and moves in a certain way, and how do we build something different by centering people most impacted in policy and decision making, and like in shaping the market, you know what I mean, shaping all of our co-ops, right? You know what I mean, to build everything out.
What message would you like to leave people with? I've heard a couple throughout this conversation, but what message would you like to leave people with?
Man, that's a great question. I would say now is the time. That like we're entering in a new season, and everybody that you talk to, they acknowledge that change is here. You know what I mean? So now it's like, using the parable of the sower, right? Like how are we shaping change? Like how are we acting right now? Like King says, don't be sleeping in the time of revolution. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, now we got to act. You know what I mean? Like, what is the thing that we really aspire to, and let's act towards it. You know what I mean? Because it's in the action that we know, you know what I mean? It's in the action that we grow and we develop our praxis, you know what I mean? And so we act to learn to act, you know what I mean? But like, let's truly like step into our heart, you know what I mean? And for me, it's like, I know there's a whole bunch of craziness coming, you know what I mean? But it's like, I'm not going to allow that to be the center of my narrative. You know what I mean? Like, I'm working with people that believe that like love is possible, and like love is the way, and that love is actually higher than all of us. And like, I'm seeking to align with that, you know what I mean? And find others globally and in my community that are also know that's possible, and let's work together.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Love is it, and working together. Action is the power also. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's get into action together. Brother Amaha, thank you very much for being on today.
Thank you.
Everybody out there, we'll see you next Thursday. We'd ask you to live cooperatively. Find people that work out of love, togetherness, cooperation, not competition. Yeah. See you next week.
The preceding program was paid for by Everything Co-op.